Hello Internet, I'm the Disney Brain and welcome to Civilized War, Nickelodeon v Disney Channel. If this goes well, then hopefully we'll have more pure debate videos where we pit one show, network, movie, or what have you against another. But first things first. So, here's how it'll work. I'm going to lay out everything I think about both networks, the good, the bad, and the ugly, with regards to shows, characters, TV movies and specials, etc., and compare them between both channels. But sharing my perspective won't be the important part. I'm just here to disseminate information that will hopefully assist you in arguing and sharing your own points. This debate is 100% all about you guys, because your arguments will determine the winner. Make your case by thinking about both networks and then describing why you think one is better than the other. Not just the network of now or 10 years ago, but why one network in its entirety beats out the other. Or maybe neither does, and that's a fair argument too. So, you may be saying, that's great and all, but how do we determine the winner? Here's how that works. All of you will comment with your positions, and I'll award points to either Team Disney or Team Nick based on how well thought out your argument is. You can argue for both sides and give points to both sides, or just firmly argue one over the other and add points to that team. I encourage you to debate each other in the comments as well, but if you choose to do that, please tread lightly, because this is Civilized War, not World War. This is about understanding, not yelling. I'll be tallying up the points for about 2 weeks, and then the commenter that makes the strongest argument achieves the grand prize of either choosing the first Nick movie I review or the next DCOM I review, even if it's Twitches. But seriously, please don't choose Twitches. So, with all of that said, let us bravely venture into battle as we begin Civilized War. First things first, Nick at Night won't count for our purposes here, just because the shows there all came from other networks first, so it's an unfair advantage for Team Slime. But Disney XD does count, so shows like Zeke and Luther, Pair of Kings, Star Wars Rebels, and most notably, Gravity Falls, are all fair game. And, since Nickelodeon hasn't been in the TV movie business for all that long, feature films such as Snow Day or the Rugrats movie are fair game. But the only non-DCOM movies that are fair game for Team Disney are movies that only exist because of Disney Channel, such as High School Musical 3, the Lizzie McGuire movie, or Hannah Montana the movie. Hopefully that clears up what your arsenals are. So, let's start things off with characters. Disney Channel has had less of a sprawling history as far as programming goes because the vast majority of people remember the golden ages being the rise of power of Lizzie McGuire, That's So Raven, Even Stevens, and of course, Kim Possible. Over the years, Disney Channel has stuck to a relatively consistent format, namely the 4-season limit rule and placing a heavy priority on female leads as main characters. Because of this format, Disney Channel has produced many very popular female actresses and singers who are either still big now or were big for a time. But the Disney Channel males don't slack off either. In fact, many of them provide an incredible backbone to many shows that wouldn't function nearly as well without them. Mr. Mosby, Justin Russo, and more recently, Farkle Minkus are perfect examples of what I deem very necessary supporting characters. It doesn't always work, however, and sometimes we get side characters like Corey or even Newt later on, who I would argue are much less needed in their roles. At its best, Disney Channel can challenge, motivate, inspire, and create characters that we don't just relate to, but sympathize with, empathize with. Disney Channel, similar to the entertainment monopoly that created it, has this innate and, shall we say, magical ability to create characters that we can feel something for, sometimes for worse, but usually for better. But Disney Channel is not perfect in that regard because it has released some shows that just don't work or that really feel like weak attempts to cash in on the same overused ideas and cliches, hoping we don't notice. And sad to say, but that's more true recently than it's ever been. The characters they create suffer the most from this because they usually embody characters that we already know and love, but a watered down version of them. Out of some of those shows, however, standouts can still emerge, and that's arguably the best trait about Disney. Its consistent ability to create good characters who are at least fun to watch and at most can really make us think about things differently. But does Disney Channel have the best characters? Nickelodeon as a network has a much more established stranglehold on the 90s and is a large part of why so many, myself included, look back on those times with fond memories. Nick also has a very different focus than Disney Channel in terms of the demographic it's trying to appeal to. It has plenty of shows that feature leading ladies, yes, but nobody would argue that Disney Channel places a greater emphasis on that. As a result, Nickelodeon creates characters in a very different way, where there are a lot of capable male leads in addition to female leads of more or less equal footing. For example, noteworthy characters like Drake and Josh from the show of the same name, as well as Keenan and Kel, are staples of the network because Nick creates more male characters that anchor shows, sometimes in pairs, but other times, like in Doug or Hey Arnold, letting the show itself carry the characters. Nick isn't perfect at character creation either, since a lot of their females, as a direct result of not being given a great deal of focus, turn out to only be memorable for one, maybe two defining traits, and aren't as fully fleshed out as someone like Raven Baxter from Disney Channel. But I would argue that Nick has the edge in creating fleshed out male characters who can be zany and ridiculous, but are usually a bit funnier than some of Disney Channel's best men. But does Nickelodeon have the better characters? In terms of movies, both networks have very different agendas. While Disney Channel was way more focused on DCOMs in the early 2000s, Nick was more concerned with releasing feature films from their shows, with movie versions of Hey Arnold, The Wild Thornberrys, and of course, SpongeBob. We throw in their recent and arguably unimpressive history with made-for-TV movies, and we get a whole that's a little all over the place. Nick has made some really good movies in addition to some bad ones, but so has Disney Channel. Taking their DCOMs into consideration, I would argue that most of them have more right with them than wrong. DCOMs, for the most part, in addition to the handful of feature films that come from Disney Channel, try to really be about something or work with an interesting idea. Several of Nick's movies do the same thing, but some of them feel very derivative. For example, Rags was solid, but doesn't it just feel like 2 or 3 DCOMs mashed together? And I would argue that Swindle is the best TV movie Nick has made, but only if you don't count the specials, such as Channel Chasers, the Jimmy Timmy Power Hours, Drake and Josh Go to Hollywood, and anything else that would fall under the category of not quite a movie. So then, I would pose the question of who had the worst movies and who had the best given all that. I would argue that the worst DCOMs ever made, just from my own perspective, are far, far greater sins than the worst TV Nick movies ever made. Not because Liar Liar Vampire is some sort of Oscar snub or anything like that, but because a movie with that title can't really disappoint you as much. If you actually go out of your way to watch something like that, or even worse, the Fred movie, you pretty much deserve what you get out of it, for better or for worse. But I would also say that the best DCOMs are better than the best Nick movies, even some of the truly great Fairly OddParents specials. But which network had the better movies? And finally, let's talk about the most general part of any network, the TV shows. Both networks have had their exceptional and terrible shows, no denying that. The shows that rise to the top for Nick are the ones that prove to be funny, meaningful, or capable of pushing the visual medium forward like few shows have, or a combination of all three. The best shows from Disney Channel are less about pure laughs, even though many of them are funny, and more about cultivating great characters from out of the narrative they construct. The best from both networks have really great writing behind them, and for the animated shows, usually superb voice acting talent that really captures the spirit of the character they represent, be them Fire Lord or Put Upon Father. Just talking about the animated shows, I feel that Disney Channel gets more out of the crazy and bizarre shows that can connect with us anyway because they utilize their concept and basic ideas so well, just like with Kim Possible or Lilo and Stitch the series, while animated shows on Nick, otherwise known as Nicktoons, become special when they use animation to discuss very deep ideas and concepts, such as both Avatars and Hey Arnold. But interestingly enough, I feel like when you talk about the live action shows, those roles are somewhat reversed. Nick live action relies a lot more on zaniness and craziness, sometimes random characters and situations. A lot of that can be attributed to Dan Schneider, as he's created most of the noteworthy live action shows on Nick, but the live action shows on Disney, at least the best ones, use their platform to handle more complex issues. Girl Meets World, That's So Raven, and even a few choice episodes of Hannah Montana have all accomplished just that. But neither network is batting 1,000 on shows, since we all know that amongst the many hits, both have hit the ground with a rather sizable thud. Both channels have had their recent struggles with unoriginal, sometimes cringeworthy programming that simply pales in comparison to some of the great work they've done in the past. But I would argue that even on its worst day, the worst Disney Channel shows are better than the worst Nick shows. And I really say that just because I'd sooner watch Cory in the House in its entirety than watch one episode of the Nick Cannon Show or Bucket and freaking Skinner. And I know that there might be worse shows than even those on Nick, like The Fred Show, but that's exactly why I stay far away from them and probably never need to watch them to understand just how bad they are. That having been said, I also think that at its best, Nick might beat out Disney Channel. I think Disney Channel is more consistent, but Nick has Avatar, 2 Avatars in fact, in addition to having one of the all-time best comedic duos, and an almost as good comedic duo years later. Disney Channel has Kim Possible at its peak, as well as Girl Meets World, but outside of those, I'm not sure the other great shows stack up quite as well. Now, it's just nitpicking at this point, because all the best shows from both networks are legitimately great, but I think Nick accomplishes the somewhat impressive feat of having the best and the worst shows when comparing both networks. But then, that begs the question, which network is actually better in terms of programming? Do we take consistency, or do we go with peaks and valleys? Talking generally about both networks, within my videos, I've done a lot of in-depth analysis on why I believe what I believe, and why certain shows deliver and others don't, and why certain characters are great, and why others don't work as well. but a lot of that is personal as well, and if you've seen my top 10 best Disney Channel characters video, especially the female version, then you know that. It's not all about functionality and narrative design and character arcs, even though that's what I like to focus on, because sometimes a show is just so much more than that. Sometimes you like or love or maybe hate a show regardless of any tangible objective facts, and that reasoning is very much valid. I could give you an objective and well thought out reason as to why I have such a high regard for some show or character or movie, but sometimes it's as simple as loving what or who you're watching, and there's no escaping that, and that's a good thing. This debate isn't about making stoic mechanical points. It's about embracing what and who you like, and understanding why others think differently or think somewhat similarly. That having been said, I love both networks with both my head and my heart. They both have their high points and low points, but both have given me more laughs, smiles, tears, and insights than any other network. And I know that this isn't really the debate, but yes, I would give slight edges to both of these networks over Cartoon Network. I love CN, make no mistake, but beyond Toonami and a handful of particularly memorable shows, there is just not as much that I personally get excited about. In any case, I hope you all enjoyed my comparisons of both networks, and I hope it helped you in some way in allowing you to formulate your own arguments and rationales. I tried my best to stay neutral during all of this because, again, it's not about me, it's about all of you. Debate each other, challenge each other, learn from each other. Even if you've never commented before, do so now. If you're subscribed here, then I know you must have something to say regarding which network is better. And in about 2 weeks' time, a winner will be crowned as the penultimate network. So, ready your points and let them fly. Unfortunately, the structure of this debate means that I can't actually discuss things with any of you for this particular video, which is kind of sad because I love talking to you all, but know that as per usual, I'll be reading all of it, and after the 2-week time limit is up, I'll probably respond to a lot of it. And remember, the best argument, in other words, the comment that earns the most points, gets to choose either the first Nick movie review or the next DCOM review that I do, after all the points are tallied up, depending on which side wins. That's about all for now. Let the debate begin, and see you all on the other side. Until then.
Stay down. Final warning. I could do this all day.
Hey everyone.